What blessings would Israel receive if they followed God's commandments? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Leviticus on walking through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Leviticus 26. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 13. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Leviticus 26, beginning at verse 1. You shall not make idols for yourselves, neither a carved image, nor a sacred pillar shall you rear up for yourselves, nor shall you set up an engraved stone in your land to bow down to it, for I am the Lord your God. You shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. If you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and perform them, then I will give you rain in its season. The land shall yield its produce, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. Your threshing shall last till the time of vintage, and the vintage shall last till the time of sowing. You shall eat your bread to the full and dwell in your land safely. I will give peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and none will make you afraid. I will rid the land of evil beasts, and the sword will not go through your land. You will chase your enemies, and they shall fall by the sword before you. 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you shall put 10,000 to flight. Your enemies shall fall by the sword before you. For I will look on you favorably, and make you fruitful, multiply you, and confirm my covenant with you. You shall eat the old harvest, and clear out the old because of the new. I will set my tabernacle among you, and my soul shall not abhor you. I will walk among you, and be your God, and you shall be my people. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, that you should not be their slaves. I have broken the bands of your yoke, and made you walk upright. Beginning with chapter 26 and going through the end of chapter 27, we come to the final section of the book of Leviticus. If you recall, section 1 dealt with sacrifices and covered chapters 1 through 7. Section 2 dealt with the priests and covered chapters 8 through 10. Section 3 dealt with uncleanness and its removal and covered chapters 11 through 22. And section 4 dealt with the holy days and seasons and covered chapters 23 through 25. The final section will be God's final exhortations to the Israelites here in Leviticus, as delivered through Moses. The Lord willing, when we get to that study, we're going to see these exhortations repeated in Deuteronomy, just before Israel would enter the Promised Land, after spending 40 years wandering in the wilderness. The first part of the chapter tells Israel what would happen to them if they obeyed God. What would obeying God look like? Well, for starters, it meant that they wouldn't make or worship idols. These idols could be false gods like the ones that the Canaanites worshipped, or they could be images made to the true God in order to perform worship. God abhors idols, even idols meant to depict him, so even we as Christians need to avoid these. Obeying God would also mean keeping the Sabbaths and reverencing God's sanctuary. Keeping the Sabbath day, though it might seem trivial, was actually quite important. It looked back to the time when God rested from his creation and forward to a time of spiritual rest with God. It was a time for Israel to focus on spiritual things. If they disregarded the Sabbath, not only would they be disobeying God in one area, but it would cause them to neglect the rest of God's laws as well, for they would become less familiar with the law that they were to follow. Christians don't have a physical Sabbath today. However, if we don't give ourselves time of rest from physical labors to focus on spiritual things, the same type of neglect can creep in, and spiritual death could end up being the result. As far as reverencing the sanctuary was concerned, that meant offering the sacrifices that were supposed to be offered in the way they were supposed to be offered. That included being clean in the sight of God, and not unclean when those sacrifices were being offered. And finally, obeying God would also mean keeping the statutes and ordinances that God had laid down. I hope that this study of Leviticus has impressed upon you the fact that God cares whether or not we keep his law. He didn't give Israel a bad law, a law they couldn't keep. He gave them a law they could keep, even though it was quite particular in many areas of their lives. But in giving them this law, Israel, and us through them, should realize just how holy God is, and when Israel broke the law, just how unholy they were. Israel depended on God's grace in order to save them under the law of Moses, just as we depend on God's grace to save us under the law of Christ. Israel couldn't make themselves holy by themselves, and neither can we. But that God gave Israel blessings that would be theirs if they followed his law show us that the law of Moses was a law they could keep. It was a law they could perform. Yes, they would fall short from time to time, But the sacrifices were instituted to help deal with that, as well as the promise of a coming Messiah. What were some of those blessings? God would send the rain regularly. The land would produce enough food to eat all year round. There would be peace in the land. Invaders would be repelled. God wouldn't abhor them, but would walk among his people, meaning that he would be with them. These are great blessings that were promised to Israel if they would obey him. They should have been blessings that Israel desired and would thus make them want to serve God. But alas, when things got comfortable or routine, Israel left serving God. What would happen to them when they did this? This is the topic for our next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Leviticus 26, verses 14 to 22, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.